The unthinkable has just happened inside the heart of British democracy. Moments ago, King Charles walked into Parliament without invitation, his face cold and unreadable, and for the first time in centuries, the Crown confronted the government head-on. MPs froze, journalists gasped, and Prime Minister Keir Starmer was left utterly speechless. 6 words from the Monarch stopped the entire nation in its tracks. Parliament exists because the Crown allows it. The last time a British monarch directly challenged Parliament was 381 years ago, and it ended in civil war. What Charles did today wasn't just symbolic, it was a thunderclap across Westminster, a reminder that power in Britain still carries the weight of the Crown. What forced the King to make such an explosive move? Why did he defy centuries of royal neutrality to face down his own Prime Minister? The answer lies in a brewing storm of arrogance, betrayal, and a desperate government pushing Britain to the edge of constitutional collapse. For weeks, Starmer's administration has been quietly advancing a controversial modernisation bill, a set of reforms that would permanently limit the monarchy's constitutional powers. Buried inside the proposal are clauses that strip the Crown of its formal role in approving parliamentary bills, reduce royal influence in appointing key Church of England positions, and make Buckingham Palace a purely ceremonial institution. On paper, it's about modernisation, but behind closed doors, it's a calculated power grab. Senior Labour advisers reportedly described the plan as a quiet revolution, one that would finally bring Britain fully under parliamentary sovereignty. To many Britons, that phrase sounds harmless, but inside royal circles, alarm bells have been ringing for weeks. Letters were exchanged, warnings issued, and meetings requested, all ignored by Downing Street. Palace officials warned that continued provocation could force a constitutional intervention. Starmer's team laughed it off. They're not laughing anymore. When King Charles entered the chamber today, he did so without ceremony, without trumpets, and without permission. The House of Commons, mid-debate, fell into stunned silence as the monarch strode straight toward the dispatch box. The Speaker's voice faltered. Even veteran MPs didn't know how to react. Starmer looked as if the floor had dropped beneath him. Prime Minister, the King began, his tone sharp but controlled. You have asked whether the Crown still matters in modern Britain. Every camera turned, every MP held their breath. Then Charles delivered his warning. 6 words that will echo through history. Parliament exists because the Crown allows it. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Starmer's face turned ashen. He tried to rise but hesitated, unsure whether to speak or stay seated. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The King continued, his words deliberate and heavy with historical weight. I have read your proposals, he said. They remind me of those moments in our history when ambition disguised itself as progress, when men sought to reshape the nation without understanding the foundations upon which it stands. He paused, then pulled a thin leather folder from under his arm. In these pages are records from 1688 to the present day. Moments when Parliament overreached and the Crown restored balance. He placed it down with a firm thud, the sound echoing across the chamber. I do not come here to threaten. I come to remind you. History is not kind to those who dismantle what they do not understand. The room erupted into whispers. Conservative MPs nodded in quiet approval. Even some Labour backbenchers avoided eye contact with their leader. Reports from inside the chamber described Starmer gripping the bench so tightly his knuckles went white. One witness said it looked as if he might faint. It wasn't just the words. It was the symbolism. The monarch himself had walked into Parliament and effectively reminded lawmakers that their authority still depends on the very institution they were trying to weaken. For a Prime Minister who built his image on control and composure, being silenced publicly by the King was the ultimate humiliation. Outside Westminster, news spread like wildfire. Within minutes, social media exploded with clips of the confrontation. The hashtag #CrownFoesCommons began trending globally. Millions of Britons who'd grown disillusioned with politics suddenly found themselves rallying around the King. About time someone reminded them who they serve, one comment read, gaining 500,000 likes in under an hour. Monarchists celebrated, Labour loyalists panicked, and the media scrambled to rewrite their headlines. For the first time in modern British history, a sitting monarch had publicly challenged an elected prime minister, and the public overwhelmingly seemed to side with the Crown. Meanwhile, Downing Street went into full crisis mode. Sources inside Number 10 describe chaos, aides running between rooms, phones ringing non-stop, and Starmer retreating to his office without saying a word. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, reportedly tried to calm the situation but was met with silence. One official told Sky News off camera, "It's like we're watching the government unravel in real time." Even cabinet ministers loyal to Starmer are privately questioning whether the Prime Minister crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. One message leaked from a Labour WhatsApp group read simply, "He picked a fight with the King, or what did he think would happen?" But the true shock came not from what Charles said, but from what he did next. Instead of leaving, the King sat down in the public gallery among stunned onlookers and watched the debate continue. His gaze, calm but unyielding, remained fixed on the Prime Minister below. No monarch in modern times has ever done this. One palace insider later revealed it was entirely his decision. Advisers begged him not to, but His Majesty said, if Parliament debates the Crown should be present. That act alone transformed a constitutional dispute into a full-blown political earthquake. Across the nation, people sensed that something historic had just happened. Britain's unwritten constitution, the delicate balance between monarchy and government, had been shaken. The question now wasn't whether Starmer would respond, but how he could possibly recover. Because after being publicly challenged by the King himself, any move Starmer makes next could either save his career or end it. The aftermath of King Charles's unannounced appearance in Parliament has unleashed a storm unlike anything Westminster has seen in generations. Within minutes of his departure from the chamber, the political landscape began to fracture at every level. Downing Street's communication team was blindsided, the palace's phone lines were jammed with reporters demanding clarification, and television networks across the world broke into live coverage. The BBC called it the day the monarchy re-entered politics. Sky News described it as a constitutional earthquake. But what no one could deny was that the balance of power in Britain had just shifted in a single unprecedented afternoon. Keir Starmer, the man who prided himself on discipline and control, suddenly looked powerless not against an opposition party but against the institution he had tried to sideline. Behind the heavy doors of Number 10, chaos turned into panic. Starmer's top aides huddled in a crisis meeting that lasted hours trying to piece together a narrative that could salvage the Prime Minister's authority. Some argued for an immediate statement condemning the King's breach of protocol, while others warned that attacking the monarch would be political suicide. Angela Rayner, visibly furious, demanded Starmer address the nation to reassert civilian leadership. But Starmer, pale and withdrawn, said little. One source inside the meeting revealed he just sat there staring at the floor, muttering that it wasn't supposed to happen this way. The reality was dawning on him. This was not just a momentary embarrassment. It was a direct challenge to his legitimacy as Britain's leader. As evening fell, the country's reaction became impossible to ignore. Crowds began to gather outside Buckingham Palace, waving Union Jacks and chanting, "God save the King." In Manchester, Birmingham and Leeds, spontaneous rallies erupted in support of the monarch. By midnight, the hashtag #StandWithCharles had surpassed 10 million mentions online. Even Labour's traditional supporters appeared divided. In Liverpool, lifelong Labour voters were interviewed saying they felt betrayed by Starmer's attempt to weaken the monarchy. One woman, a retired schoolteacher, summed up the national mood. "I voted Labour all my life, but when the King stands up for the country and the Prime Minister sits down, you know who's right." International reaction was swift and intense. From Ottawa to Canberra, Commonwealth leaders praised the King's duty to history. Canada's Prime Minister called it a dignified defence of constitutional principles. In Australia, opposition MPs cited the incident as proof that the monarchy still holds the moral compass of the English-speaking world. Even across the Atlantic, former US President Donald Trump weighed in on Truth Social. King Charles showed strength and leadership. Starmer looked weak and disloyal. Within hours, financial markets began responding. The pound fell nearly 2% against the dollar, reflecting investor anxiety about Britain's political stability. Analysts warned that if the crisis deepened, a full-blown economic shock could follow. Inside Westminster, the tension was unbearable. Conservative MPs, sensing opportunity, launched an all-out assault on Starmer's leadership. Rishi Sunak, speaking from the opposition benches, declared, "A Prime Minister who cannot command the confidence of the Crown cannot command the confidence of this country." His words drew cheers from Tory ranks and stony silence from Labour MPs. Even within Labour itself, cracks were widening. Senior members like Lisa Nandy and Jess Phillips began publicly distancing themselves from Starmer's constitutional reform plan. Nandy's statement, "The monarchy has served Britain longer than any government, perhaps we should remember that," went viral within minutes. By the following morning, 4 Labour MPs had resigned from minor posts, citing moral disagreement with the government's direction. The media smelled blood. Newspapers across the spectrum ran blistering headlines. The Telegraph splashed, "The King reminds Britain who reigns," while the Times simply declared, "Crisis of the Crown and the Commons." Even the normally Labour-leaning Guardian conceded that Starmer had overreached disastrously. Overnight, public polling began shifting with breathtaking speed. A Snap YouGov survey found that 68% of Britons supported the King's intervention, while only 19% backed the Prime Minister. Among voters over 50, support for the monarchy soared to 81%. For a leader who had built his image on restoring public trust after years of chaos, the figures were catastrophic. Inside Number 10, the atmosphere had turned mutinous. Ministers were quietly discussing contingency plans in case Starmer was forced to resign. According to leaks obtained by the Sunday Times, several cabinet members had already opened private channels with senior civil servants to ensure continuity of governance. The phrase being whispered through corridors of power was Operation Stability. One aide described the mood as worse than the Truss meltdown. Starmer's authority, once unquestioned, was evaporating faster than anyone thought possible. Meanwhile, the palace maintained a deliberate silence. No official statement was issued. No apology offered. Insiders reported that King Charles had spent the evening in quiet reflection at Windsor Castle, reviewing historical precedents and speaking privately with constitutional advisers. One courtier told ITV the King knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to remind Parliament of its roots, and not to dominate it, but to anchor it. But within government circles, that nuance was lost. To Starmer's allies, it felt like a coup in slow motion, a monarch reclaiming moral supremacy over the elected government. To the public, it felt like leadership. By the next morning, the crisis had evolved from political spectacle into national reckoning. Newspapers were sold out before dawn. Talk radio lines were jammed with callers demanding Starmer's resignation. The opposition demanded an emergency parliamentary session, and Speaker Lindsay Hoyle confirmed that a special debate would take place Monday morning. Rumours spread that several cabinet ministers might use the session to break publicly with the Prime Minister. Even the financial establishment was growing uneasy. Reports from the Bank of England suggested internal discussions about emergency confidence measures to calm market volatility. For a government already struggling with inflation and NHS backlogs, this was the worst possible timing. The question gripping the nation was now unmistakable. Would Starmer fight back, or would he fall? His silence, once mistaken for composure, was beginning to look like fear. Political insiders whispered that he hadn't slept in 36 hours, pacing his office and refusing to take calls from senior advisers. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace remained serene, untouched by the noise. The King's message had been delivered, and its echoes were reverberating through every corner of the realm.